I think getting rid of that fear that standing up for myself and speaking my truth is going to push people away, that's what an anxious attacher can do. You have to get over the fear and the ick when you're thinking about setting boundaries with someone. Because I know our fear of abandonment gets triggered really hardcore when we imagine telling someone no or being separate from someone.
Well, hello there, and welcome to this episode of the Terri Cole Show. I think you're going to love it. I just had a fascinating conversation with Rikki Cloos, is her name. She's a writer and a content creator with a captivatingly authentic, honestly, passion for attachment healing. So her whole thing is about anxious attachment from her life experience. She has a book out, which is great. It's called The Anxious Heart's Guide. And I started following her on Instagram. And the moment she started talking on one of her videos, I was like, who is this person? I love the way they are communicating about anxious attachment from such a knowing place. So in this interview, we talk all about what drew her to this, her own experience, what happened in her own marriage because of her own anxious attachment, why boundary setting can be really challenging for the anxiously attached, and what you can do to get better at it. So I hope that you enjoy this interview with Rikki Cloos as much as I enjoyed interviewing her. I'm super excited to welcome Rikki Cloos to the Terri Cole Show. Hi, Rikki.
Hello, thanks for having me, Terri.
So incredibly excited that we got it together and you are here.
I'm excited too. I have been a fan of yours for a while, so I'm going to try to not fangirl too hard over here. I'm very excited just to have you on the screen and on the mic. It's exciting.
Why, thanks, Rikki. You're so nice.
Mhm.
Well, I'm a fangirl too, which is why you're here. So why don't we start with, for you, let's just your definition as you're teaching this and helping others, because you're really a fellow traveler, right?
Absolutely.
You've become an expert on your own for your own reasons. So let's talk about, first of all, what is anxious attachment?
I want to start out for everyone listening to say that our attachment style is not like a personality disorder. There's like a lot of stigma. I know people feel very pigeonholed into when they discover it, they think this is how I am and this is how I'll always be. So first and foremost, our attachment styles are a set of behaviors that we've adopted from very young age that can be changed. So let me start out with that. An anxious attacher is somebody who's going to tend to be more clingy, more emotionally up and down in a relationship. They have trouble letting their significant other out of their sight. They need to be in contact way more than is healthy usually. And those are my people. That's how I used to be. I am not like that anymore. My goal is to help people out of that.
Amazing. So tell us more if you would. Like, I love origin stories. Like, really, how did you personally become interested in this topic? So interested that you
Mhm.
really have become an expert in what it
Oh,
is and helping
thanks.
thousands of people around the world, hundreds of thousands maybe at this point, you know, be less anxiously attached in their relationships.
Yeah, well, I came by it naturally as somebody who was incredibly anxiously attached, but I wasn't even familiar with that terminology until I found myself on the brink of divorce. Thank goodness, I had the wherewithal to ask myself, how am I contributing to this relationship breakdown? I'd been married for 12 years. So that's a really long relationship that I didn't expect to dissolve in the way that it did, and I knew that I had to be at least part of that. Thankfully, I am a raging nerd. I just absolutely love psychology. My background is in marketing and design and writing, but when I wasn't doing any of that, I was reading psychology books. Naturally, when my marriage started to fall apart, the relationship books were very appealing. The self help books were very appealing. But when I stumbled upon attachment theory, it was just all the bells started ringing. And I was like, this is it. I even showed my ex husband while we were in the process of splitting up. And he was like, that's us. That's us, the classic hallmark anxious and avoidant attacher. But unfortunately, we didn't look into that stuff until it was way too late. So we did decide to split. I kept going, I kept researching. I must have read 60 books on it. And I thought, I saw as I was reading that I was getting better. I wasn't acting in those ways that were pushing people away. I really just, as a writer, I thought, I have to tell people about this. It was way too exciting to keep to myself. I also thought, like, a lot of these things that I love to read are very dry. I would love to be able to communicate it to people in a very approachable way. That's one of the things I loved about your book. Boundary Boss was written, it was like you were sitting down with a friend. That's my style of writing too, and I think it really works well for people. They don't want to be sit and lectured to. They want to sit with a friend and hear difficult things in a way that's easy to digest, I think.
I totally agree, and thank you for saying that. It's
Mm-hmm.
interesting. It's the accessibility. I think I was drawn to your work
Mm-hmm.
exactly for what you're saying, that there's an accessibility and an easy to understandness. So for people who
Mm-hmm.
are unfamiliar, let's say, with
Mm-hmm.
anxious attachment, and there's other attachment styles, of course, but
Mm-hmm.
what would you say are the hallmarks, and maybe what were the hallmarks in your own relationship of someone who is anxiously attached in a relationship? What is their behavior like?
Yeah, I think the the thing that comes to mind most readily for me is the fact that I didn't seem to have a personality myself. And that's not to say that there weren't things that I liked and wanted, but when a significant other was in my view, all I cared about was what they wanted and what they needed. Very codependent. Another word I wasn't familiar with when all of that was falling apart. Yeah, but I think an anxious attacher is going to behave very codependently. We kind of morph into whatever we think our significant other or potential significant other would be the most drawn to and happy with. We're raging people pleasers, and gosh, that was the worst. That was the worst, but that's what comes to mind the most clearly for me.
It's so interesting because with people pleasing, it's like when you're really a hardcore people pleaser,
Hmm.
you want to please everyone, even people you don't like.
Absolutely. Isn't that strange? Yes, everyone. No one was free from my desire to please them. Yeah.
Right. It's like, of course, from a logical point of view, you're like, that doesn't make sense. And yet
Hmm.
it
Hmm.
does so much from an emotional point of
Yeah.
view. There is such a fear. Listen, I agree. And I want to just concur with what you said at the top,
Hmm.
that this is not a forever identity. This is not a fatal flaw. This doesn't
Hmm.
mean if you identify with this because you're watching it on YouTube or you're listening to the podcast, yay, right? Think of
Hmm.
this as like, wow, the same moment that Rikki, you experienced when you started reading and being like, oh my gosh, this is me.
Yeah.
And look, there are things that I can do. But let's go back to sort of the scene of the crime. What
Sure.
do you find the most with the people in your community? Because you have a big anxious heart community of
Hmm.
people. On Instagram is over 100,000. You've got a whole lots and lots and lots of people have this experience. But what do you say about the childhood experiences? And do you say that they're causal? You know what I mean?
Well, the research certainly seems to point to that. I know a lot of people will reflect on their childhood and say, well, I had a great childhood. I'm not sure why I resonate with all of this so much because I feel like my parents were very present. But honestly, and one of my favorite examples that I always point to is I have two siblings, and they are really, really not anxiously attached. So I think if it was purely just my parents acted in this way and it caused me to be this way, all siblings would have the same attachment style, and that's not how it is. I want to believe that I'm kind of high energy and anxious anyway. I came out of the womb that way, and my siblings aren't. They're kind of laid back. So, and I told this to my mom, who was also very worried that she screwed me up when she started reading about all this that I was writing. I think I'm imagining baby Rikki in the crib. I would have been more bothered by mom taking an extra second to get to the crib and soothe me than my siblings would. So I do think that there's a lot of nature along with the nurture that plays
Yeah.
into that.
Being a psychotherapist for 25 years, I totally
Hmm.
agree that the nature piece, and
Hmm.
if you have kids, like being a mom, like kids are
Sure.
so individual and so different, and their
Absolutely.
temperaments from birth, as you're saying,
Hmm.
are very different. I say that because what I want people to take away from our chat
Hmm.
is hope and what they can do, and also not a worry that if you identify with this, that you're somehow dissing your parents. Maybe your parents did a great job, maybe they did a horrendous job, right? We have
Sure.
every mix in between, and those experiences are real. But I think
Hmm.
that when you start to focus on healing an anxious attachment style, it's being
Hmm.
in the here and now in a way that's important, unless you have a lot of trauma and rupture and things in your past that do require more work from you. There is so much
Hmm.
that you can do for yourself now, right? Because I do think it's important as a therapist. I go back with clients and with the stuff that I teach when I feel like I must go back to go forward successfully. But I
Hmm.
also don't feel like we need to endlessly go back for no reason,
Yeah.
unless something that happened when you were 4 is blocking you from creating what you want in your life now. Then I'm very interested in whatever that was. But I feel like,
Sure.
especially with attachment style, there's a lot that we can do right here and right now without being able to be like, oh my God, it was that experience in second grade, and that's exactly
Hmm.
why I am this way. By hook or by crook, we got here. So we're here now. Let's move into,
Yeah.
why do you think that boundary setting is especially difficult for anxiously attached folks? Because I notice this in my practice and I see this in my courses.
Hmm. Hmm. I love that question because I remember when I was first learning about boundaries, and I was far more anxiously attached when I came across the term boundaries in the first place. It felt like the ultimate disconnector, just the word boundaries. I just imagined a fence or a wall, and I was like, I don't want anything to do with those. Like, I'm trying to get more closeness here. What do I need boundaries for? And I think that's part of the reason that anxious attachers struggle so much with it, because they don't recognize how connective boundaries can be. I'm sure anyone who's read your book knows all about that by now. But if you're listening and you haven't, pick up Terri's book, Boundary Boss, because you will see if you're resisting boundaries because you think that they're going to separate you from the one that you love, it's exactly the opposite.
Thank you. And it's so true. I like
Mm-hmm.
to reimagine it, right? Because I do know that the
Mm-hmm.
myths out there around boundaries are vast. And the most common myth is that it is a block to deeper
Mm-hmm.
intimacy. And I always talk about healthy boundaries being the bridge to deeper
Mm-hmm.
intimacy in a real way and more gratifying and satisfying relationships,
Mm-hmm.
because you're more actually known, right? Seen, heard, and
Yes.
authentically known, which when we're people pleasing, what are we
Mm-hmm.
doing? Hiding,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like you
That
said,
was a
you, right, right?
that was a mind blower for me to learn that people pleasing is actually a barrier to intimacy. I get these questions daily on the Instagram account, and they're like, well, if I'm doing everything for this person, if I'm pleasing them, I'm always there for them, I'm like, how is that not bringing us closer? Boundaries are the key to that. That's not something that people recognize enough.
And part of how it's not bringing you closer when you are doing all the things and being codependently attached to others and anxiously attached to others is that you are nowhere to be found,
Hmm.
right? The whole
Totally.
relationship is predicated on and built around the wants, needs, thoughts, desires, situations, circumstances of the other person. And
Hmm.
it's like being like the biggest cheerleader or being the best support that the person ever had. But
Sure.
then you get to a point, right, where that's not sustainable.
Absolutely. I like to use the metaphor of a mirror. That's what I felt like. I wasn't a person standing there with a significant other. I was a mirror reflecting everything about them back at them. And when you think of it that way, it's easy to imagine the real me hiding behind that mirror, with all of my own thoughts and feelings and desires. But no one can see them because all I'm doing is shining back what I think the other person wants me to be, which is a copy of them.
Right. And the
Mhm.
thing is, we will meet people who want that. But if someone is halfway healthy, they don't,
Yeah,
right? Like if
it's true.
someone
Yeah.
is a narcissist, then they're like, yes,
Mhm.
please, it's all about me, and yay,
Absolutely.
let it be all about
Yeah.
me, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Narcissist is it's a touchy word online too, because I think it gets thrown out a lot. I think a lot of us have narcissistic tendencies too. That's a tough thing to admit. If you are someone who's with a significant other who seems to enjoy the mirror that you're reflecting back to them, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're a raging narcissist who needs to be locked up. Sometimes it feels very good and safe when people are reflecting things back to us that are exactly the same. That
Yep.
otherness can be a little tough to cope with in relationships sometimes. I just wanted to add that. I know I personally don't allow the word narcissist on the Instagram page just because of the abuse that I've seen people
Yep. And when
use
you
with
really
it.
think about it from a statistical point of view,
Hmm.
maximum 7% of the world
So small. Yeah.
might
Yeah.
actually be a diagnosable narcissist.
Hmm.
So what you're saying is true. And I think the misuse and the making it pathological
Hmm.
and, oh, wow, being so into the label
Yeah.
again.
It also
Yeah.
it directs the responsibility away from us, right? It feels very good when we can point our finger at somebody else. This is the reason why this stuff is happening to me. I love It's like tough love. A lot of people have told me about my page, but I love the tough love aspect of like, how am I contributing to this situation? And that's another part where boundaries comes in. You don't have to worry about narcissists if you have healthy boundaries. You really don't, because they won't even
Nope.
be able to get through.
Right.
Yeah,
And they won't be attracted to you because they won't be able to get
absolutely.
their narcissistic supply. But it's
Hmm.
funny, Rikki. It's like you just read my mind when you were saying, like the whole thing about boundaries and the whole thing about wanting to label and
Hmm.
that the onus, now I have a reason and now
Hmm.
I've sort of let myself off the hook for doing the hard work. And I
Yeah.
think that what I love about your work and what you're putting out there in the book that you have that
Hmm.
people can get right now if they want to, where can they get your book?
Yes, yes, yep. It's The Anxious Heart's Guide is available right now on Amazon or my website.
Excellent. There's something about, again, putting the onus somewhere else. And I think that a
Hmm.
lot of times people are afraid, right? And they don't
Yeah.
know what to do. So that's why if this is resonating with you, then you
Hmm.
need to follow Rikki online. You need to become a part of this community where they're like minded, like hearted. And what I love about your work is that you, like I do, create a safe space
Yeah.
for people to be themselves and to be vulnerable. And I think that that can be really hard to find online. And these are
Yeah.
these are tender topics, right? This is tender. This is your most tender heart when we're talking about something that's blocking you from
Mhm.
creating the relationships that you want. So, what is the single most important thing that anxious attachers can do to improve their boundaries, according to you?
Well, would it be weird if I said they should definitely read your book? There's another book that I love too. I believe it's called The Better Boundaries Workbook. It's by Sharon Martin. I
I
love
love
that one
Sharon Martin.
also.
Yeah,
Yeah,
she's
she's great.
amazing.
Both your book and her book. Just understanding boundaries better and understanding how they are actually connective and build intimacy. I think getting rid of that fear that standing up for myself and speaking my truth is going to push people away, that's what an anxious attacher can do. You have to get over the fear and the ick when you're thinking about setting boundaries with someone. Because I know our fear of abandonment gets triggered really hardcore when we imagine telling someone no, or being separate from someone. When you consult the experts and read their words about how boundaries can actually bring you closer to the person that you want to be with, it's a game changer. It's a tool.
It is a tool. I also think there's something really important that I've seen in anxious attachment is that it's such a fear-driven experience. So much of the
Yeah.
time there's so much hypervigilance
Hmm.
to check to see, like, is this person pulling away from me? Why don't
Yeah.
I know where they are? They were supposed to text but they didn't. Did something bad happen, or are they not interested, or whatever? And
Hmm.
it's super important to get to the point where we realize that we're not that fragile and that
Yes.
our relationships are not that fragile. So,
Yeah.
yes, if you have been a people pleaser all of your life and you start establishing
Hmm.
boundaries, there's
Hmm.
going to be a time period where you're going to be getting pushback, correct?
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That brings up another thing. This is like half of my book, too. As an anxious attacher, learning that we can stand on our own 2 feet, and I go over in my book ways that we can do that, helps to remove a lot of that fear. I love the swimming metaphor. I use this a lot. If we feel like we need to hang on to someone else or we'll drown, of course, we're going to check for any sign that they're swimming away from us by maximizing our independence, building up our social support network, therapy, learning who we are and what we like to do on our own, and building secure relationships, even platonic ones. Those are the things that help us learn to tread water or even swim gracefully on our own without needing to cling on to someone.
I love that analogy because it's so true and it's so understandable, right? If you
Hmm.
don't know how to swim, of course
Yeah.
you're going to be just hanging on for dear life. And
Hmm.
those steps that you're talking about, building up a social network,
Hmm.
doing things that build your self-esteem,
Yeah.
and learning to know who you are. What you said at the top of the interview about
Mhm.
your own marriage is that
Yeah.
you really didn't know yourself. You felt like a shell of yourself or like a mirror for your partner.
Yeah.
And how do you help people when they're like, I want to know who I am, but I don't know who I am? So what
Yeah.
are ways that people can find out more about who they are?
I recommend journaling a lot, but I would, being a writer. I have had a lot of people tell me, like, I'm not a writer. The journaling doesn't appeal to me. There was an exercise that I did early on that I absolutely loved. It said to gather up like five of your closest friends in your mind, not all together, and approach them one by one and ask them, hey, can you give me three words that describe me? And when I read that assignment, I thought, oh, this will be fun. I know exactly what all of them will say. Every single one of them surprised me. And the things that they noticed and appreciated about me, the three words that summed me up and they were different for every single friend, it really helped me to see that I am someone individual that my friends recognize and appreciate in ways that I don't even recognize in myself. That was such a wonderful exercise. So, if you're not a journaler, if you don't want to take a deep dive into your own mind, take a little stroll into the minds of your friends and the people who care about you because they can help point you in the direction of who they see you being.
Right. I love that so much. It's such a powerful exercise because I find that women in general, we have a tendency to amplify our
Mhm.
bad qualities in our mind or amplify what we think are our deficits as opposed
Yeah.
to amplifying our positive traits. And it's
Mhm.
almost like someone can say, oh, thank you so much. And it's so easy to be like, it was nothing, right?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Well,
But
I
yeah,
know.
but learning to say it was something is helpful.
Yeah, very. I grew up very religious, and pride was definitely a sin, also. So I grew up learning that you're not supposed to be looking for all the good things in yourself. You're supposed to be looking for the things that you need to improve and the bad things that need to be washed away. It's a wonderful exercise in getting to know yourself, finding the positives about you. Those are self-esteem builders, and they're absolutely essential to learning how to swim on your own.
I love the idea of taking the words that do this exercise that Ricky was talking about, you guys, and take
Hmm.
those words and put them on a note in your phone, have it be your screensaver for a while.
Yeah.
And when you see those words, like allow them to really sink in.
Hmm.
That is your friend's truth. So if
Hmm.
your fear mind wants to kick up and be like, I wasn't so great at this or whatever, believe that you have people in your life who are telling you the truth and that these qualities are who you are to them.
Hmm.
And it's like, it's such a beautiful way of building this self esteem muscle. And another thing about getting to know yourself, if you're a lifelong people pleaser, what we really want is for others to be happy, right? Like when people are like, what is your preference? And I'd have so many clients be like, my preference is that there's no conflict. My preference is
Right.
that everyone
Mhm.
is happy with me and approving of what I'm doing. And
Mhm.
flipping that and not having that be the focus, meaning
Mhm.
your own specific and unique preferences matter, as do your limits, as do your deal breakers, because those are the things that make you you. And I think that I have clients who would, when I would say like, well, what do you like? Or what is your preference? Or, they'll be mad about something like, oh, I went out with this friend and we went to the same restaurant. She always wants to go to this Greek place and I didn't really like Greek. And I'm like,
Mhm.
well, did you say anything? And my client said she didn't ask. And I was
Oh,
like,
yeah.
does she need to ask for you to assert
Yeah.
yourself? You know?
Hmm. Yeah. I was that girl. I was that girl for sure. I would go as far as saying that I wouldn't even feel comfortable offering it up if someone asked at one point, you know. I might just default to what I thought they wanted me to say. But the baby steps, and eventually I was comfortable when they asked. My current partner is wonderful about that. He can see when I'm holding back and he'll ask. So that's nice. But I do try to make a point now to throw my opinion and ideas out there and see what happens.
Is your
Be-
current partner securely attached?
He is not. He's not. I'm not sure how to talk about this. This might be another book. My current partner is avoidantly attached. That's kind of something that I'm also very excited about. The idea that an anxious attacher and an avoidant attacher who are very aware of their patterns and working on it together can have an absolutely beautiful relationship.
That's a book, Rikki. That
It
is
is a book, isn't it?
amazing.
I know. I'm just excited even thinking about it. But I'm still practicing. We're still working out the kinks. I need to be able to talk about that in a way that's easy to access and understand. And so I haven't quite gotten that figured out yet. Maybe that'll be 2023 or 2024's book.
Yep, I love it. Because here's the thing, for those of you if attachment styles are very new to you and you don't know, which I'm surprised because I do talk about them as well. An anxious attacher is seeking more closeness. An avoidant
Mhm.
attacher is seeking more space. Can be feeling overwhelmed or smothered by the
Mhm.
closeness, but there's the conflict because they want the closeness, but they get the closeness and then feel, if they haven't done any work on it. So what you're
Yeah.
saying is that your partner is aware of
Mhm.
his attachment style. And
Mhm.
was he before you guys met?
No, we had a very tumultuous start. It was rough. I was aware of the things, and he was not. For, boy, probably the first year that we were dating, I spent a lot of that time looking at him and saying, "Man, you're a great guy, but if you're not addressing this and working on it, I'm probably gonna have to jet because I'm aware of why you're doing these things and you're not." I kept working on my side of it. I kind of provided a safe landing space for him a lot, and eventually he just saw the new calm that I had. Oh man, Terry, it was my favorite moment ever. It's like he came into the room one day and he was like, "You're different in a great way, and I want in on some of that." He's like, "I don't know what you've been reading or what you've been doing, but let me know because I see the changes that you're making and I want that too."
So beautiful. That
Yeah.
is so beautiful. But that is also love. Because
Mhm.
here's the thing I always say to clients when they're in a rough situation, I feel like almost anything is figure outable, right? As my
Mhm.
friend Marie
Mhm.
Forleo would say. But it takes two to tango. And you both have to be willing to explore your stuff. And with Vic and I,
Yeah.
before my husband and I got together, I
Mhm.
said to my friends, I was like done with dating, living in New York. I was a talent agent, dating, there's no, nothing working out. And
Mhm.
when I was single, I'd said to my friends, I'm not going to date anyone who hasn't had like 2 decades of therapy. And they were like,
Oh, yeah.
what?
Good luck with that, right?
That's
Find
exactly
that's
what almost every person said. Good
yeah,
luck with
that's tough
that.
to find.
And I remember saying, on the first date with my husband, and it was a blind date. We were hooked up by someone. This was long before there were apps, because this was
Mhm.
25 years ago. And I said, "What do you think about therapy?" And I had just graduated grad school. I had just become a therapist. And he said,
Mhm.
"Oh, I'm a fan." And I said,
Mhm.
"How big of a fan?" And he said, "Oh, I've had a lot of therapy." And I was like, "But if you had to estimate how much?" He was like,
Mhm.
"At least 20 years."
Oh, wow. Look at you. Wow. Oh, that's
And I
awesome.
was like, "I guess we can go on date two."
Yeah, I love it. That's that's a boundary you'd set, right? Wow, you did it.
Mhm.
That's
It was so
um
weird, sort of manifesting it very specifically. But I
yeah.
also knew I wanted that
Mhm.
because I knew when the shit hits the fan, and inevitably in any relationship, life,
Mhm.
death, the life cycles, kids growing up, all the things,
Mhm.
that if and when, if we needed more help, I wanted to
Yeah.
be with someone who, the same way his health as a stipulation, meaning what he could control, was like,
Sure.
you must stay healthy. You're already 10 years older than me. You
Mhm.
have to stay healthy, work out, take care of your heart, do all the things. Just be as healthy as you can possibly be. I mean, if he got sick, obviously I wouldn't hold it against him, but
Right.
meaning I want to have the same lifestyle, but I also wanted
Mhm.
to be able to get a check-in and a tune-up and go to
Mhm.
therapy with him or with the family or with whomever when we needed to. And there
Mhm.
are things, just like you have a toothache, you wouldn't be like, I should be able to rip out my tooth on my own. Like, you, right?
Totally. Yeah.
Let's go to the specialist. So I think
Mhm.
that for any relationships,
Mhm.
it's a beautiful story that you shared about your partner,
Mhm.
sort of being willing to do his own work because he wanted to be able to meet you where you
Yes.
were, right? He
Mhm.
noticed your ascension to a degree, your evolution, and
Mhm.
he wanted
Mhm.
some of that. It's a really beautiful story, and it's a story of love. It's
Yeah.
self-love and love of other, you know?
That's yes, I'm a big part of that story. Because if I was just sitting pointing the finger at him, that he wouldn't have had that insight. No. I wanna commend him too. I noticed in him, even though he was an avoidant attacher who was unaware of this stuff when I met him, 2 things that I noticed in him that I absolutely loved. 1, my pain moved him, and that's huge because you will find people in this world who are not moved by your pain, and you probably need to make some distance between yourself and that person. My pain moved him even if he didn't know the right words or how to fix it. So that kind of empathy was really important to me. And the other thing was that he was very interested in improving himself, not necessarily on the emotional mental landscape at first, right? But I noticed that he was always somebody who was striving to do bigger, better things for his body, for his community, for his family, and that was important to me too. And I saw those seeds, and I thought this is the type of person who, when things get tough, he's going to look for solutions even though
Yes.
he's avoidantly attached.
Yep. And you
Mhm.
see the potential, but from evidence. Not
Mhm.
not not the
Mhm.
potential based on projection or a
Hope.
wish or something else,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You saw the potential
Absolutely.
based on his past behavior in other areas, which is a
Mhm.
good indicator that
Mhm.
he would, like you said, look for solutions in this realm as well. So beautiful.
Mhm.
All right, so let's
Yeah.
talk about. I have one last question for you.
Mhm.
Personally, what has been your most challenging boundary struggle, and how did you overcome it?
Ooh, I mean, this comes right to my mind, right when you say that. It was the toughest thing for me to learn to respect my partner's boundaries.
Mm,
And that's embarrassing to say, but I know from my interactions with the wonderful community there on Instagram that anxious attachers can be serious boundary violators. We just can. There's so
mhm.
much fear. If we think that reestablishing contact is going to make us feel safe, we don't stop to consider if we're bulldozing someone else's boundary. That was my biggest challenge, was learning to self-soothe long enough so that I could recognize other people's boundaries and sit myself still and not just trample all over the things that they needed, because usually those things that they needed were space or difficult truths, and they were things that were scary for me to handle.
Right.
That
That
was tough. That took
is
a lot of practice.
yes. And tolerating your feelings, right?
Oh,
Sitting in the
yeah.
discomfort and being like, wow, this
Yeah.
feeling won't kill me, although it feels like it's going to, but it
Yeah.
doesn't.
Ooh, yeah, that was tough. That's a great way to put it too. Some of those feelings some of them feel life-threatening, they're so scary, and
Yep.
it's a journey. You have to be really brave to sit through those, but it's worth it when you make it out the other side and realize that you're okay.
That's what I'm talking about. Okay,
Mhm.
so you guys, you can get Ricky's book, The Anxious Heart's Guide, available on her website, which
Mhm.
is anxiousheartsguide.com.
Exactly.
So
Yep.
that's Anxious Hearts, Hearts
Mhm.
guide.com, and Amazon, and wherever we're selling books, you can get it.
Mhm.
And if this is something that's interesting to you, please follow Rikki on Instagram. And you are at,
Anxious Hearts Guide is the Instagram handle.
got
And
it.
there's only
Okay.
one account. The Instagram scammers are popping up like crazy.
I super appreciate your time. I love what you're doing in the world. Thank you for spending time with us today, and keep doing the good work. I really appreciate
Yeah,
you.
you too, Terry. Thank you so much.